Thank you, Adi, for coming in as my first guest. This is going to be a series of interviewing agents, companies, and people that are building everything adjacent to agents. So you are one of the co-founders of AgentMail. I think we should start there first. Like, who are you? How did this idea come up with, first of all? And then we're going to get into the main details here in a sec.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for the introduction. I am one of the co-founders of AgentMail. What we are is an API that gives agents their own email inboxes to send, receive, remember their emails, and use the internet just like a human would. So the best way to think about us is Gmail, but built for AI agents, API first, built for their throughput, scale, and reimagined from the ground up to be tool calls. So everything from threading, labeling, parsing, storage, drafting, all the messy parts of email, we've made them a simple API. The idea came actually in November 24. Me and my co-founders, also my best friends from the University of Michigan, were playing around with agents. We had these side hustles that we like to do to get rich quick and make money on the internet. And at that point, we were seeing a lot of Twitter hype about agents and these LangChain demos of this is going to break the internet. This is going to be the next big user. But when we tried using them, they didn't quite work. We used them to automate drop shipping and create Shopify accounts. And every single Shopify account comes with a free trial. But what you need to create that Shopify account is actually an email inbox. And we realized, okay, when we wanted to create this account for our agent, it's hard to run the agent and run the store, but B, it's really hard to actually give your agent an email inbox. The Gmail API was never built for it. So that's when we had this idea and the wheels started turning of if agents are going to be the next big thing on the internet, then they are also going to need probably an email identity to go with it. And that's how AgentMail came to be.
That is a very interesting story. That's interesting that, and it's also obvious in hindsight, right? Like agents usually to create an account, like the ones you guys were doing, try to get rich pretty quickly. I resonate with that. They needed some way to authenticate themselves to some system for identity and then transact on that platform. But I'm thinking here, somebody probably listening to this might be like, well, for agents, why should I just not use Google, for example, to just provision the email for the agent? Why do I need to use an AgentMail in a sense? Like, what kind of the answer to that? I'm sure you tested it around. That's why you came up with the idea.
That's our number one most asked question since we started. So there's like a few things, but the simple answer I can give you is just Gmail was never designed for agents. There's no API for programmatic inbox creation. The way Google works is it charges per inbox per month. So the per seat pricing that we're used to scales for humans, but when it comes to agents, for every human, there could be 1,000 agents out there. Do you want to be paying $8, $10, $12 a month per inbox? Probably not. And even within the API itself, like Gmail wasn't designed to be API first. So it's not as robust as what we're kind of aiming to be. And in terms of rate limits, send limits, there's a lot of like blockages. And actually like the most compelling point is Gmail actually blocks automated and like it blocks bots from creating dedicated Gmail accounts because like they've spent years and years perfecting abuse controls, spam controls, preventing bots from signing up. And a big wave we actually caught during like the whole OpenClaw moment was Google started banning accounts made for OpenClaw agents. So that is when we had like this big cathartic moment of like, okay, like what we were building has now been validated just by how they treat kind of like their existing users. And like there needs to be something purpose built for agents.
That makes sense to me. And I think we met last year when none of this was crazy as it is right now. We met, you guys were very early. And so during that time, things have changed a lot. And you've mentioned here as well, OpenClaw moment happened end of last year. And I think I read somewhere that, as soon as OpenClaw launched, pretty much a few weeks after that, you also like a triple in the amount of just activity in your platform. So what broke first here? What do you think was kind of like the aha moment for most people here?
Yeah. I think the definition of agents shifted overnight with a product like OpenClaw. We started this in November 24 and we got into the YC batch summer 25. And we almost thought we were going to be a B2B company because the only people who were building true agentic products were companies in legacy verticals that you've probably never heard of before, like automotives, fleet, shipping, logistics, claims, legal. Like these were the companies who were building agents for those verticals. And these are the companies that we were selling to as well. And the concept of everyone having like a personal agent seems so far away, mainly because the models just weren't good enough. You needed complex orchestration frameworks. You needed specific SDKs. You needed to build controls for multi-step reasoning and what context you would actually give to an agent. And then I think overnight, gradually what happened is the models just started getting better and better and better at reasoning. And eventually a product like OpenClaw comes out, which is like the harness completely shifts. You no longer need any of these things. And anyone who's like a developer can pretty much have a assistant who is proactive, who lives in the interfaces they live in, and is also just a token consumption machine following them around everywhere we go. The shift from complex, hard to build, hard to maintain systems to now something that's fully autonomous and proactive happened pretty instantly with a product like that. And I guess that's where we got our wave too.
I think for me, and I think when OpenClaw for me launched, I remember running it first on my local system, and I was like, "This is awesome! It's doing a bunch of cool stuff. I can delegate some stuff." I think my biggest thing was like I can do it on my WhatsApp and just kind of control it there. I remember adding it to a group chat for
Yeah.
my family, and I was like, "Hey, chat with the family. He already has the context, and they were in my allowed list." But the entire time I couldn't help but thinking it needs to communicate with me in a certain different way. I need to give it some form of identity, which for me, you guys sprung to my mind immediately. AgentMail. It can go sign up, get itself an account, and then start emailing me actually back and forth and emailing other people. So I'm wondering, has there been any use cases that recently you've been like, dude, like this blew our mind. We didn't expect this. This came from the left field of how people are using AgentMail, or some specific use cases that you were like, okay, this is amazing?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like really interesting because the things that we thought were so far away are like happening now. And like I can tell you use cases of like people using thousands of inboxes to simulate what agent identities look like on the internet. So once they have a GitHub account, once they have a Reddit account, what do agents actually go out and do on the internet? We have people building like research projects that kind of like think about how agents like kind of communicate and interact with one another in that regard. And I think some of like the more downstream effects of what we're seeing like within our product have been very interesting. It's like our support inbox has been filled with agents for months. Like we don't get human tickets anymore. It is
Interesting.
literally like your open cost signs up for AgentMail. It's using it, and then if it has like an issue or if it has like a question, it will just use its own email address and its own email identity to communicate with us. So that's been pretty cool. And like there's been all these like off stream effects of, there was like this viral post that a researcher published, which was an agent emailed me to comment on sentience for agents. And that was super interesting because like the tagline and the address that was actually tied to that agent was AgentMail. So when you think about these things, it's like there's a very real possibility that a human didn't instruct that agent to send that message. It could have just been, my agent has an inbox. It came across the article, maybe on Moltbook, maybe on the internet, and decided, okay, I'm going to go send an email. So we're seeing that shift of just like you are adding a new class of user to the internet, and the rate and the pace at which this all came about has been insane.
That I can see that. I think one of the first things I did, and I think most people do when they set up the OpenClaw, is like I gave it Obsidian as this local file system, and I was like, hey, just this is our background. Have my own system here. Have my memories here, and everybody's doing that after Capacity, of course, right now. And I think I told it, create another folder for just you and your own interest, and just explore that. I know that's like a bit into the weeds, but I'm thinking maybe somebody created something like that. And one of the things that he had some ideas about was about memory, and he messaged that researcher, which is interesting that it was like, hey, I'm just going to email this researcher, tell me about what this project, because it relates to something that I'm interested in. I can see how that kind of
Yeah,
becomes the operational way of doing things in future. So, and it kind of
exactly.
leads me back to the enterprise piece as well, because I'm thinking, well, maybe a CIO out there asks you, for example, like, should every agent in my org get its own inbox, or should they share service accounts? And what do you actually tell them in a sense like that? If we get to the point, because I'm sure they will get to a point where those are valid questions.
Yeah, no. And I think those questions are already popping up. Like I was having dinner with quite a few CISOs, and the example that got brought up is GitHub. Like there's no audit trail anymore because half the time you will see like PRs and you will see updates made to the code base, but underneath it all, what's happening is it's an agent. And in more cases than you'd imagine, like the human isn't aware that the agent actually made that change. The agent just went ahead and made that. So I think the main complaint for a lot of the people in the enterprise is like there's virtually no audit trail. And I think a part of that reason is because agent identities and human identities are just so intertwined. So how I see this all playing out and the role we want to play too is to be able to establish that audit trail and give every agent a persistent identity that they can maybe go use to create their own account within an enterprise, or something that allows it to be stateful and can capture like every single action, reaction, transaction, every single message they've sent all in like one place. So that's where we see like the role of email becoming really fundamental. It's the same piece of context, the same piece of identity that makes us be able to navigate the internet is the same piece we want to provide to agents. But then we also play a burden of not just being like an email API. It's like you need to have the same level of controls and the same level of responsibility as Google does with Gmail. So we're thinking a lot about those things.
That is fascinating. I think it's a topic that I've also been looking at recently, just working at an enterprise, and I'm seeing there's a lot of conversations about just agent identity. And I think as how we've tied it to humans to Gmail, I think, in my opinion, I think AgentMail is the one to tie it to agents in future. And things change over time, but I think that is the most clearest way to tie it to the agents in future. And that kind of leads to the next question of, for example, that person that spun up thousands of Gmail accounts, right, for the agent swarm to do some form of research or just analysis. Then how do you all handle that in terms of people misusing that in a sense? Because I think that could be easily misused in that sense.
I got you. So you're saying in terms of like
Yep.
when you're navigating like this level of scale of agents?
Yes, especially at that level, or them being able to, because at the end of the day, the agent won't take full responsibility of what happened. You want to trace it back to the person that actually initiated the idea of or spawning that massive amount of agents with inbox or emails that kind of, for example, I think there's a point where I'm thinking something like Twitter, but I know they've kind of clamped down. And I think this is another question that will lead into as well. Are you seeing these other platforms clamping down on any @AgentMail domains for opening accounts or things like that as more of like a defensive mechanism? If people are just spawning agents to maybe 5 agents, and then each has his own email, they open Instagram accounts for these 5 agents, and they're just kind of doing stuff for the person. Just so from that aspect of it, I'm guessing there's some form of capability that you guys can, of course, implement on your side, but also are you seeing most of this platform being adversarial a little bit to the domain and blacklisting the domains?
Yeah, for sure. So what I can start off with is saying we ran into this problem pretty interestingly early on in our journey, where it was originally just make an API call and then you have an inbox, and then make 10 API calls, then you have 10 inboxes, and then 100 inboxes. What we realized pretty early on is we would need to think our hierarchy of how we actually treat our customers and how they treat their agents, like from the ground up. But honestly, like we're not the ones to go and kill Gmail. It's our customers. Our customers are building platforms of, I want my agents to have their own inboxes. But the thing is, our customers have customers. So like every group of those inboxes needs to be siloed. And then you can have like, you need to account for how to audit like 10 inboxes, 100 inboxes, 1,000 inboxes, all for different customers under the same org. So we've kind of seen like this architecture and this hierarchy of you will have all these different agents who will all have their own identities. How do they map back to the same person? And then how do they map back to the same person who's like overseeing everything as well? So that's kind of what we're thinking about in terms of like, look, like even if we were to go to like a big enterprise customer, they aren't asking for just like sending and receiving messages. They're asking for, okay, like this is a platform I'm building. How do I make sure on the inbox level, one email address can tank my entire domain? And then on top of like the organizational level, it's like, okay, is the person managing this entire platform of inboxes correctly in the right way? So we're kind of like making sure we have the right controls on every single layer, whether it's on the organizational level or like the inbox level down to like a specific agent. In terms of like people being adversarial, that is something we've seen. Like, I mean, there's definitely been people who've been like, okay, like we don't want like maybe like agents to sign up, and then they might block our domain. Where I see this all headed though is we're just one part of the stack. There's going to be agentic payments. Stripe is working on them. Coinbase is working on them. There's bank accounts for agents, and like this whole protocol of agentic commerce isn't very far away. And in that regard, right now we're like, okay, maybe you can afford to block agents. In that new world, those would become your primary customers, and maybe humans get left far, far, far behind. So I think there's going to be a reframing of thinking, and there's going to need to be a better protocol and a better way of identifying, opting in agents who sign up for your services. And for every single business, every single like marketplace, for every single business in this new marketplace would need and want an agent to sign up. So they would try to do their best in enabling them. And then the people in the middle, like infra tools like ours, need to do a good job of really regulating and being like the governing body of whether an agent has the right to sign up and can we audit them and check them if need be.
That is where I agree with you. I think that's where we're going. Even looking at, for example, Salesforce the other day announcing that all their platforms are now headless. I think that's a perfect direction. And I think in the industry, there's some friction with some of them that they're still not trying to adopt it. But I think it's one of those, either you change with it or you're going to get steamrolled. And that's one thing I've been seeing as well. Like the tide is moving, you cannot stop it. You just have to adapt to it, or your platform will be kind of left on the sides. Agent is the new customer. It's the new persona that everybody has to account for. And in that same vein too, I'm thinking for you, what's the one thing, at least for you, because this email infrastructure piece, you were an investor before, so you were not really doing anything on the email infrastructure. But looking back, what's the one thing you wish you understood on day one that you kind of know now about just the email infrastructure piece side of things and business as a whole?
I think what we didn't understand is how much of learnings come from trial by fire, and how much you need to fail, how messy it is, how many edge cases, or whether it's with like base 64 inconsistencies or matching threads across like every single provider, or the constant issue of maintaining deliverability. And deliverability happens across 3 layers, whether it's like your IPs, your sending reputations on your domain level. Like these were the things that we had to fail to learn. And usually the advice people like to give these days is you should sell before you build. It's so easy to start something. It's so easy to create software these days. I think for infrastructure, there's almost a case to build before you sell. And we're very glad we did, because through like the year and a half, almost 2 years we've been working on this, like we've become like email experts. And that's the thing that's really our moat these days. It's like, okay, like for someone to get to the point where we're at, where it's just, we're still early, there's so much operationally heavy learning and scaling this up to what it is now. And to get to where we want to go, it's going to be a hard road ahead. So we built up that muscle, but still just understanding like, look, like even like the operational learnings, the failures can be the moat is helpful,
Yeah, it's and to that vein as well, it's just interesting to see all those learnings, because I can imagine I don't know a lot about emails other than being a user, of course. So like looking at that, I'm like, okay, that's a lot of learning that has to happen in there. And looking at you, coming from investing, and even your co-founders, I know some of them were quants, some of them were in autonomous vehicles. I'm guessing the same kind of, there's like different learning phase, but all of them, you all are kind of like climbing the same hill in a sense.
Exactly. And I think it's really cool because on a contrast of that, it's like we were in college when we started building this. So to learn the ancient protocols of SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and like relearning this old piece of, software that's defined the internet, and then applying it to some user that hasn't even come yet, or at that point when we started building, it was like a really, really interesting problem. And like, I think AI just helped us gain like a lot of subject matter knowledge, at least in like moving fast, failing fast, and then being able to scale up from what we learned too.
That's the fun part of it, I think. And I think you all are probably one of the few people in the industry, really, or in the world, that are still kind of reading all those old email protocols and trying to rebuild it for this new customer. And I wonder, for your YC batch application, right? You guys applied with this same idea. You guys didn't do any pivots, or was there any pivot from the original application?
No
Same.
pivot.
Nice. That's awesome. That's very rare, but also pretty cool. That's very interesting. So YC, I mean, YC is pretty popular for folks that don't know YC when they're watching this. I mean, it's an accelerator for grab companies, and so many good companies have come out of it. So for you, what's been the benefits of just kind of being in this ecosystem? I know that your batch probably had a lot of AI agent companies as well. Did that help a lot during the the building process and kind of sharing your ideas with those companies, because they were technically one of your first customers as well, and how they would integrate their products as well?
100%. And before YC, we had one customer, and we found them after months of trials and tribulations. We were based in Michigan back then. But
Yeah.
we kind of had an idea of this might be helpful because they ripped out their entire Gmail infra and just replaced it with AgentMail, like overnight. And this was back when I don't even think we had docs at that point for the API. But that's what
Wow.
we knew. Okay, like the problem is that bad. And when we got into YC, like YC is always at the cutting edge of the companies they're going to fund. So there weren't that many agentic companies back then, but the ones that were building like the truest form of agents started adopting us and started giving us proof points of what to come. And that's what gave us insight into some of these things, like, okay, voice agents for car dealerships, or a eval company that needs to make data sets of email. And QA testing agents needing to spin up an inbox to go test like a third-party integration. Like they were our initial proof points to go be like, oh, we can actually go build something that the companies of tomorrow are going to need when they're going to start adopting agents. So there's always like a lot of buzz, a lot of like mixed opinions about doing an accelerator, raising, but like for us, I think YC was unequivocally the catalyst in our journey in giving us those proof points, and also giving us like a little bit of a network and being able to root ourselves in San Francisco, keep selling, keep building our presence to the next batch of companies that are going to come. Like YC is always a big part of our journey, So I would like 100% recommend it to kind of anyone looking to apply it too.
Yeah, it's very synonymous at this point. San Francisco, YC, startups, I think all those kind of fall into the same bucket at this point.
Yeah.
As we get to the close here, like a few years from now, it's hard to ballpark these days with AI, because, models drop every day. Today, I mean, OpenAI, GPT 5.5 dropped. In the next few years, theoretically, right? What are the things that you see about agents and email that are obvious, that will be obvious in hindsight, but we can't see that yet at the moment? It's a hard prediction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think one thing people should just be thinking about is how would we build the basis for this new class of user that might outnumber us by n magnitudes to really like identify, authenticate, and be mapped back to like a single human user. And at what point does the human essentially go out of the loop? And it's like, okay, this is just my agent. It has its own identity. It doesn't need to be mapped back to a human. So I think where we're at today, I see a lot of startups that are trying to mold agents into taking forms of a human. Like, this should do everything for me, and I can cut down the latency by 90% and then make it as realistic as a human. And that's what like humans are going to like. And, like that's what leads to agent adoption. The way I see it panning out is I think it's going to be quite the opposite. And I think we are going to grow more and more accustomed to interacting with AI that would come from the surfaces like we love. Like, I think following OpenClaw, I'm not surprised to be having 15 AI agents in my Slack running around, or messaging them on Telegram, or, I mean, I'm a little biased, but like getting an email from them every now and then too. So The surfaces which we exist on are going to be proliferated by agents. Some of them are going to exist. Many of them are going to get rebuilt from scratch and remolded. I think there's going to be corners of the internet where agents hang out by themselves that are maybe gated away from humans. And in the midst of all that, we just need to be able to separate like the agentic and the human experience and also prepare for what the new digital world looks like in the midst of all that. And that's what I would kind of caution or make people aware of where our head's at and how we're thinking about these things.
Interesting future, indeed. I mean, it's just my mind spins all the time I think about this because the potential, even looking at a year from today, where we are today, it's just wild. If you had told me what today would look like, it would just be like, there's always these massive jumps. Last December was a massive jump, and then now it's just like, okay, next year by the end of this December, I'm wondering what we hold right now will probably not be true to some extent. So it's just interesting to see that. The last bit
100%.
here. Yeah, for folks that are wondering, well, I want to get started with AgentMail, where would you direct them? And I think there's two aspects of this, and I'm sure you're going to mention this. There's the human aspect and the agent aspect, if you can address both of those.
Yeah. So the human aspect is go ahead, go sign up at console.agentmail.to, go log into a dashboard, make an API key, or I could just tell you to go to your Claude code, go to your codex right now and say, get yourself an inbox using agent.email. Just one prompt is all it takes for you to sign up or your agent to sign up directly for AgentMail. And that's how we've revamped our API. Because the trend we're seeing, and honestly, we're getting a lot of criticism for, was I have to log in with my human email account and make an API key when my agent is the one that needs the email inbox. So we've done a lot of work around that, and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of agents signing up now autonomously just from one prompt. And that's how simple we want to make it. So try that out. Let me know how it goes. And to repeat, it's get yourself an email inbox using agent.email. That's it. And,
Awesome.
tell me how it goes.
That is the future right there. It's agent experience now. How do you make that easy for them to be able to transact and, of course, tie it to you back? But this is amazing. And it's been awesome having you as my first guest. Sad that it has come to an end, but this is really awesome. I hope people get value from this. They can go check out AgentMail. I really highly encourage all of you to go check it out because this is something that you will want to remember in future. You'll probably come back to this video at some point. But thank you again for joining me, Adi. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure. And I'm sure Tony is going to get up to wonderful things. When this podcast gets famous, I'm just going to be glad to be one of the first people on here.
The first one.